Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me.
Ross, don't chicken out, okay? Just be ready by 7. Gwen was laughing when she said it. Her voice had that charged-up tone she got before every big surprise, like when she dragged me to that silent disco downtown, or booked us into that creepy treehouse Airbnb with the compost toilet. I groaned. Come on, Gwen, can we not do the mystery tour thing? We finally have the same day off. Exactly, she shot back. So trust me, this one's huge, for us, for everything. I rolled my eyes but smiled. That was Gwen. Chaos in a cardigan. Always, just trust me. And somehow, I always did. Quick note before we jump in. Drop a comment with the city or country you're listening from. It helps us see where everyone's tuning in and plan the best time for new stories. Thanks for watching Revenge by Frank. All right, let's get started. I hung up and sat on the edge of the couch in our condo in Milwaukee. Work slacks still on from the half-day at the office, college t-shirt clinging to my back from the heat. The spreadsheet I'd brought home sat unopened on the kitchen counter, and instead, I was watching some guy on YouTube rant about insurance fraud. Gwen hated when I did that, said I had the worst taste in content for someone who did risk analysis for a living. 7 o'clock came and went. No Gwen. No, guess where we're going. Call. No fake-out text saying we were headed to the opera or a goat farm or whatever she'd cooked up. By 7:20, I was checking the hallway like a nervous dog. At 7:40, I texted her, "You bailing on me or what?" No response. Then I remembered the last thing she'd sent. A selfie in her car, tongue out like a teenager, seatbelt across her chest, wind messing up her bangs. The caption read, "Be ready by 7, no excuses." My chest tightened. Gwen wasn't late. She just wasn't. Not for a dinner, not for jury duty, not for anything. At 7:52, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway, expecting her voice and some dumb line about getting lost or forgetting gas. "Ross Griffin?" the voice said. Male. Flat. Like someone speaking through a tunnel. "This is Deputy Hayden with the Kenosha County Sheriff's Department." Every hair on my arms lifted. "Your wife, Gwen Griffin, has been in a collision." I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just sat there, eyes locked on the black TV screen like it could translate what I was hearing. There was a head-on crash on I-94. Paramedics responded to the scene. I'm very sorry to inform you. I don't remember the rest. Words hit me like a mouthful of gravel. Didn't make it. Paramedics. State line. Pronounced at scene. My hand dropped the phone without realizing. It landed screen up on the coffee table. I just stared at it, like it would light up again and say she was fine. But it didn't. And I knew. The next few days felt like I was watching someone else live my life. I signed things I didn't read. Nodded while people I barely knew touched my shoulder like I was made of glass. Felix showed up and kept trying to drag me out for air. My mom, Ingrid, filled my fridge with soup and sticky notes with microwave times. But I couldn't stop hearing her last voicemail. I promise this is going to change everything for us. She was driving somewhere to show me something that would have changed our lives, and she never made it. And I had no clue what it was. I couldn't bring myself to touch the mug. It sat there on the counter, lipstick faded like she'd rubbed it halfway off with her thumb and meant to finish later. I stepped around it every time I walked through the kitchen, like it was wired to explode. After the funeral, after the fridge filled up with things I never asked for, everyone left. Felix went back to dispatching rideshares and texting me memes I didn't answer. Mom returned to her numbers and her tidy life in the suburbs. My phone stopped buzzing. The silence after that kind of week isn't peaceful. It's suffocating. I didn't cry much. I just stopped doing things. For 2 weeks straight, I watched muted weather channels and reruns of old crime shows while lying sideways on the couch like a guy trying to nap through an earthquake. My job hadn't expected me back yet, and I didn't argue. Showering felt like an accomplishment. Toast was a task. The spreadsheet on the kitchen table was still in my work bag. I'd brought it home the day Gwen died, thinking I'd get a head start on next quarter. I never opened it. I stopped opening anything. My doctor called after week 2 and said something about grief counseling. I mumbled something non-committal and hung up. Then, one afternoon, I stood in the kitchen trying to remember if I'd eaten anything the day before and came up blank. That scared me enough to finally make the appointment. Not because I wanted help. I just needed everyone to stop asking. The counselor had kind eyes and a voice like she'd worked retail before this job. I sat in her beige office and said all the things that make you sound functional. I understood grief was non-linear. I knew about shock, denial, bargaining. I worked in actuarial. I said it like that meant something. Like my job calculating life expectancy gave me a special pass through tragedy. I'm not confused, I told her. One mistake, one wrong turn, and everything you planned collapses. I get it. That's literally my job. She nodded, wrote something down. Probably that I was full of it. What I didn't tell her, not at first, was that a piece of me had been relieved when Gwen died. Not because I wanted her gone. That wasn't it. But because now I didn't have to keep pretending I was excited about the next big thing. The next possible change. I'd built a life out of stability and spreadsheets, and she was the one who kept trying to shake the snow globe. We'd found out I couldn't have kids 7 years ago. It hit her different than it hit me. She threw herself into book drives and reading festivals and volunteer programs. I buried myself in work. Gwen was out building story times for other people's kids while I was chasing career ladders. That was how we coped. We never said it, but the issue didn't go away. It just got buried under a pile of calendar invites and grant proposals. Ingrid came by once a week with soup and the kind of quiet efficiency that made me want to punch a wall. She'd sit, eat half a bowl with me, then wipe down the counters like she was just keeping her hands busy while the rest of me fell apart. "You don't have to fix this, honey," she told me one night. "You just have to outlive this part. That's the job right now." Felix had a different approach. He called it the 3-pronged method: whiskey, sports, and oxygen. He dragged me to a Bucks game where I stood in the crowd like a mannequin, then to the lakefront where we walked 5 miles in silence. Finally, at a dive bar off Brady Street, he slammed down 2 shots and said, "If Gwen was here, she'd slap me for this, but forget it. Drink one, then get out of your own head." I didn't drink it, but I stayed, and we talked about other things for an hour, which was the closest I'd come to feeling normal since the phone call. The dreams started after that. Always the same setup. Cracked blacktop under my feet, some abandoned school lot or old playground. A little girl kicked a red rubber ball toward me, frowning like I was late. Sometimes there were other kids behind her, humming this weird off-key tune I couldn't place. Always the same 4 notes. Always the same stare. I'd wake up with my shirt stuck to my back, heart pounding. At first I chalked it up to stress, my brain doing grief gymnastics. But there was this part of me, the same part that spent all day thinking in ratios and risk models, that whispered, "This feels like something. This isn't random." One morning, Ingrid stood in the doorway holding a Ziploc bag of frozen rolls and said the thing I'd been avoiding for weeks. "Ross," she said softly, "you're going to have to go through her things at some point. You can't live in a museum forever." I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I already knew she was right. I slept on the couch that night, like avoiding the bedroom would stall the clock somehow. Like Gwen's jacket on the back of the chair would stay warm longer if I didn't touch it. But the mug on the counter was still there the next morning. Same smudge of lipstick, same faint scent of citrus. And when I picked it up, just to move it, just to finally stop flinching every time I saw it, I realized my hand was shaking. I didn't plan it. I just stood in the hallway one Tuesday morning with a mug of cold coffee in my hand, looked at the closed bedroom door, and said out loud, "Start small." The closet still smelled like her. That same citrus lavender detergent Gwen insisted on buying in bulk because chemicals give her guilt rashes. Her side was packed the way she left it, folded, color-coded, soft layers I never understood but recognized like wallpaper. The festival shirts were stacked in columns. Most of them had little inside jokes printed on them from past years. Page turners and late returns. Loud readers anonymous. Banned books never die. I didn't laugh at any of it. I just sat on the carpet and started 3 piles. Keep, donate, and a pathetic one in the middle for things I couldn't deal with yet. That middle pile grew the fastest. Ingrid called mid-afternoon. She always timed it when she thought I'd be emotionally fatigued, which pissed me off more because it worked. "Don't try to conquer the world in a day," she said. "Pick one thing. Maybe her nightstand. That's manageable." "I'm already ankle-deep in cardigans and sarcasm," I muttered, holding up a hoodie that still had her hair on the collar. "I'll deal with the drawer later." "You'll deal with it now," she said, firm, "before you shut down again." I hated how her voice sometimes sounded like Gwen's when they were both sure I was overthinking everything. So I did it. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled open Gwen's nightstand drawer. A gust of peppermint and dust hit me. Inside was exactly what I expected. Chapstick tubes, old receipts from grant meetings, sticky notes with names I didn't recognize, a dead pen, and half a pack of Orbit gum. I dumped everything on the bed, figuring I'd toss what didn't matter. But when I yanked the drawer all the way out, something hit the underside of the wood with a dull thunk. My hand froze. I turned the drawer over, and that's when I saw it. Duct tape. Thick, gray, sloppy. And behind it, wedged between the frame and the underside like someone meant to keep it hidden forever, was a beat-up spiral notebook with creases in the cover and frayed edges. It wasn't Gwen's usual style. She was digital for almost everything. If it had a paper trail, it was usually printed and filed. This looked personal. I peeled the notebook free, duct tape tugging at the wood, sat back on the bed, turned it in my hands, then opened the front cover. The first line was scribbled in her blocky left-handed print. Private. For me only. G. My whole body locked up. 10 years. 10 years of marriage. I'd never snooped. Not her emails, not her planner, not even when she left things wide open. That was the deal. We respected the line. We trusted each other. I almost closed it, almost shoved it back in the drawer and walked out of the room. But then, just under the bold title, I saw it. If anything happens to me before I talk to Ross about Kelly, start here. My name. On the page. It didn't feel like reading. It felt like someone had reached inside my chest and grabbed something sharp. I flipped through it, quick. There were 31 entries. No dates, no titles. Just numbered entries in her same handwriting. The ink changed halfway through, maybe different days, but the tone didn't. It was her voice, raw and fast, and too alive for the woman buried under that lopsided maple tree. Entry 1 started with a name I didn't recognize, Zach Drake. By the 3rd sentence, I knew exactly who he was. She didn't hide it. Gwen never did things halfway, not even in secret. She laid it out clean. Zach Drake was her ex-fiancé, the one she'd left years before we met. They'd been serious, nearly engaged when she was in her 20s, and had stayed on occasional speaking terms after the breakup. According to her, he got sick, leukemia, died 2 years ago. What she didn't tell me while she was alive, what I found out from this spiral notebook under a pile of gum wrappers, was that Zach had a daughter. Her name was Kelly, 5 years old when he died, 7 when Gwen met her. Kelly had been placed in a children's center outside Waukegan after her mom lost custody due to repeated drug relapses and a court ruling on ongoing unfitness. Zach had no other family willing to step in. Gwen wrote that she found out about the girl through a friend in the book festival world, a woman who used to know Zach's sister. There'd been no contact while he was alive, no overlap with our marriage. That part mattered to Gwen. She wrote it 3 times in different entries, like she was trying to convince herself. No contact, no secrets while he was living. I didn't cheat. She didn't have to tell me. I believed her. What I couldn't make sense of, what tightened in my throat the longer I read, was why she never told me about Kelly. Not after she met her, not after she started visiting every Friday. She described the place like it was some patchwork of sadness and hope. The man who ran it, Raymond Bell, showed up in almost every entry. Gwen called him tired but kind. She wrote about the worn-out carpet in the common room, the bookcases she helped fill with library donations, and the reading corner she created with leftover festival swag. She called it Book Nook Fridays. She'd go every week, read to the kids, stay a little longer just to talk to Kelly. Said the girl was suspicious at first, snappy, guarded, rude, but smart. So smart it scared her. Entry 7 had a line that made me stop breathing for a full minute. I think I've already started to love her, and I have no idea how to tell Ross. That was the moment the floor fell out. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. I didn't even know what I was. But I suddenly understood Gwen's voice on that final voicemail. This will change everything for us. She wasn't being dramatic. She was being literal. And now she was gone, and I was sitting alone with a notebook full of pages I wasn't sure I had the guts to finish. I stayed up that whole night reading the rest of the notebook. Gwen had written about meeting Kelly like she'd discovered a planet no one else had noticed, one with cracked sidewalks and loud opinions, and this impossible gravity that pulled her in before she knew what was happening. She didn't try to romanticize it. She described their first meeting like a crash. Kelly had rolled her eyes when Gwen offered a book, told her, "We already got 3 of those," then walked away mid-sentence. But Gwen came back the next Friday, and the next. And eventually, Kelly started sitting closer, started pointing at the pages instead of walking off. Gwen wrote, "It wasn't a breakthrough. It was a pattern. She tests everyone. She just tested me longer." She described the center like it was barely hanging on. Old linoleum tiles that squeaked, crooked paper signs taped to peeling walls, and a bulletin board where the kids' art was stapled in overlapping layers. Raymond Bell ran the place with a mix of exhaustion and focus Gwen respected. She called him a decent man with a good spine, and said that was rarer than people thought in his line of work. Kelly showed up in almost every entry after the 5th one. Gwen called her a tiny hurricane with big brown eyes, said she was sharp, sarcastic, and so used to being disappointed she treats kindness like it's probably poisoned. She wrote about how Kelly used to interrupt her mid-sentence just to say, "You don't have to come back." They never do. Gwen came back anyway. One Friday, Gwen brought a box of donated books and set up a corner on the floor with a faded rug and 2 beanbag chairs the size of small animals. She called it Book Nook Fridays and made a deal with Raymond to come every week. Some of the other kids came and went, but Kelly stayed. Sometimes she didn't talk, just sat drawing weird birds with huge feather crests while Gwen read to whoever would listen. But she never missed a week. And then Gwen started writing about me. She didn't blame me, not exactly, but she laid things out the way she always did, plainly, precisely, no wiggle room. There was one entry where she wrote about us seeing a family at the zoo. The dad was trying to juggle 3 kids, and one of them threw a stuffed lemur into a fountain. I'd muttered something like, "Exhibit A for why we're fine as we are." Gwen didn't answer at the time, but she wrote about it later. He says he's too broken to be a dad, like it's a diagnosis. But I think he's just scared. And it hurts, because I think I could love this little girl if I let myself. I think I already do, but I can't share it with him, because he talks about adoption like it's a risk assessment. That one hurt. Reading it, I could actually hear my own voice, all business, all logic, saying those exact things. Too broken. Fine as we are. Unpredictable variables. Stuff that sounded smart at the time. Now it just sounded like someone slamming a door in her face. The middle entries were all Kelly. Her moods, her questions, her brutal one-liners. One Friday she told Gwen, "You read better than the TV lady, but your hair's wild," then climbed into her lap like it was nothing. Another time, she asked Gwen if she had kids, and when Gwen said no, Kelly said, "Good. They'd just leave me too." Gwen didn't write what she said back, just that she'd gone to the parking lot afterward and cried for 20 minutes before driving home. There was an entry where Gwen wrote she'd looked up fertility clinics again, even though she already knew my infertility wasn't fixable. She admitted it wasn't even about that anymore. I thought I wanted biology, she wrote, but now I think I just wanted someone to want me as their person. Kelly already does. And I'm scared of how badly I want to be hers too. That was when she started seriously considering telling me. She'd written about talking to one of her old law school friends, someone who worked in family court, about what it would take to adopt a child from another state. Not because she wanted to do it behind my back, because she was trying to get all the facts before dropping it on me. He always wants the facts first, she wrote. If I show him just the emotion, he'll shut down. But if I bring him something real, something tangible, maybe he'll stay in the room long enough to hear the rest. She wasn't wrong. Near the end, her entries started sounding more rushed, like she'd stopped journaling and started using the notebook as a way to organize her plans. She wrote about talking to Raymond, about promising Kelly that a surprise was coming soon, and about how nervous she was to finally loop me in. The last full entry was a letter. It was addressed to me. Ross, if you're reading this, something went wrong. I chickened out again, or worse. I didn't want to leave you with questions, so here's the truth. Her name is Kelly. She's 8 this winter. She's Zach's daughter. I didn't know about her until after he died. There was no overlap, no contact. But once I met her, something clicked. She needs someone to stay. I want that someone to be us. If you can't do it, if this breaks things, I understand. But don't walk away without meeting her first. She's more than a decision. She's a person. And she's already waiting. The final page wasn't even a full entry, just a scrawl at the bottom, like she'd run out of time. Next Saturday I'm picking Ross up, not telling him where we're going. I'll swing by the center earlier to set things up, then pick him up at 7. I'm done hiding. He deserves the whole truth, and so does she. If he walks away, that's on him, not me. That was the day she died. That was the road she was on. She wasn't driving off to a spa weekend or some surprise dinner. She was going to see Kelly, to make sure everything was in place, and then come get me. She was going to take me to meet a little girl I didn't know existed. A little girl who, in Gwen's mind, was already halfway ours. I didn't sleep the night I finished the notebook. Just paced. Sometimes in the dark, sometimes with the lights on, like that made a difference. Every few minutes I'd stop, stare at her handwriting, then start muttering to no one. You don't drop something like this in a drawer and tape it shut. You had 10 years to ask. What did you think I'd do? Just explode? I was mad. Not grief mad. Real mad. The kind that makes you clench your teeth even when you're just microwaving leftovers. The kind that burns right behind your eyes. And it made me feel awful, because what kind of person gets angry at someone who's already dead? Apparently me. I called Felix the next day and said something dumb like, guess I was wrong about everything. He told me to meet him at our usual dive on 3rd. Cheap wings, lukewarm beer, and the one waitress who always called us Han like we were 60. I needed that. Or maybe just noise that wasn't coming from inside my skull. I found a journal, I told him, tapping the notebook like it might bite. It wasn't just a whim. Gwen was serious. She was going to introduce me to this kid. Felix nodded slowly, like he already knew. You're mad because she believed you were better than you thought you were. That's not the worst crime, man. I didn't say anything for a while. Just picked at a plate of wings I couldn't taste. She was driving to see the kid the day she died, I said finally. She had it all planned out. Pick me up, take me there, drop the bomb. You still got the address? No, but she left clues. Highway exit, director's name. Said it was near an old rail line in Waukegan. Felix pulled out his phone. Then we find it. That night we tracked it down in under an hour. Google gave us 3 hits, but only one of them was near the old tracks. A municipal children's center with low Yelp reviews and an old .org site that hadn't been updated since Gwen was alive. There was a blurry picture of the building front and a staff list that included Raymond Bell. I sat there staring at the screen, notebook open in my lap, feeling like someone had lit a fuse in my chest, and I didn't know how long it had left. The next morning, I got in my car and drove to Waukegan. No announcement, no plan, just raw nerves and a half tank of gas. I made it as far as the gate. It was taller than I expected. Black iron, with one section rusting at the hinges. Beyond it was a playground. A few kids in mismatched jackets ran back and forth between a slide and a battered picnic table, yelling and laughing like they were in a different world. I parked, turned the engine off, sat there gripping the steering wheel. 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Then I turned the car back on and got out of there fast, like I was fleeing the scene of a crime. I ended up at the shoreline, pulled into a public lot near Lake Michigan, walked down to the rocks, and sat on a cold bench until my legs went numb. The waves slapped hard, wind biting through my sleeves. I kept hearing Gwen's last line in the notebook. If he walks away, that's on him. Well, that day, I walked away. On my way back to the car, a kid ran past me, no adult in sight, humming the exact same four-note tune from my dream. I froze, heart thudding, but kept moving like it didn't mean anything. Like it couldn't mean anything. That night, the red ball showed up again in my sleep. Same cracked pavement, same little girl. But this time, she didn't ask me why I was late. She didn't even look at me. Just turned her back and walked off, humming that weird little tune while I stood there like a scarecrow, empty hands out. The next morning, I put on a real shirt, one with buttons, called my boss and said I needed a personal day. He grumbled but didn't argue. The second time I drove to Waukegan, I didn't stop at the gate. I pulled into the lot, parked, and walked straight to the main entrance like I had every right in the world to be there, even though my hands were shaking like I'd downed 6 coffees and a confession. Inside, it was exactly how Gwen had described it. Scuffed linoleum floors, bright murals that looked like they'd been painted by someone trying really hard not to cry, and the faint scent of crayons and whatever disinfectant they used to clean up after kids with stomach bugs. I stood there trying to remember how to breathe. A tall man stepped out from a side office, sleeves rolled, tie askew. His eyes were tired but sharp. I didn't need a name tag. "Raymond Bell?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "That's me." "My name's Ross Griffin," I said, voice low. Gwen was my wife. I watched his face change in real time. Recognition, then confusion, then something that looked a lot like guilt. "She stopped coming," he said quietly. "We thought she just burned out. Volunteers do that sometimes." "She didn't burn out," I said. "She died. In a car crash. On her way here." Raymond closed his eyes and exhaled, the air leaving him in a rush. Then he gestured for me to follow. He led me down a side hallway, through a heavy door, into what looked like a shared common space. Couches, beanbags, little tables covered in Legos and sticker books. In one corner was a low shelf packed with worn-out children's books. Over it hung a handmade banner in blocky, uneven letters, "Gwen's Book Nook." The moment I saw it, my throat closed. "She wrote about this," I said. "She planned it, named it." Raymond nodded. "She brought books every week, built this little corner from nothing. The other volunteers helped hang the banner after her second month here." I stepped closer. The handwriting on the banner was definitely hers. I would have known it anywhere. Above the shelf, taped crooked to the wall, was a drawing done in thick black marker. A woman with big curly hair holding a book, standing next to a little girl with spiky pigtails. On the woman's head sat a bird with a ridiculous feather crown. I pointed at it. "That's a cockatoo." "She was obsessed with them," Raymond said, smiling faintly. "Drew birds constantly. Said Gwen promised she'd find her one with a crest like that someday. That's Kelly's drawing. She said it was the 3 of them." "3?" He looked at me. "Gwen, Kelly, and the bird. She never mentioned you. Just said someone important was coming soon." My chest ached like I'd swallowed concrete. To this kid, this real living kid, I wasn't Gwen's husband. I was nobody. Worse, I was the person who hadn't shown up the day Gwen said someone special was coming. I stood there, staring at a homemade reading corner in a building I'd never set foot in, realizing Gwen had already become part of this girl's world, and I was just the gap she left behind. Raymond didn't try to sell me on anything. He didn't give a speech or a pamphlet or one of those polite smiles people give when they're waiting for you to quit wasting their time. He just stood with his hands in his pockets and asked, "Do you want to meet Kelly today? Or someday?" I don't even remember making a decision. My mouth opened before my brain caught up. Today, before I chicken out again. He nodded once, like that was the answer he expected, and motioned for me to follow him down a hallway that smelled like whiteboard markers and cafeteria food. We passed a group of kids doing homework on the floor, a teenager arguing with a staff member over tablet time, and a toddler screaming about a juice box like it was the most important thing in the world. The meeting room was small and plain, beat-up chairs, a tiny round table built for second graders, a box of broken crayons shoved against the wall, and a stress ball sitting on the table like someone had left it mid-panic attack. I sat down on a chair that made my knees ache and tried to pretend my hands weren't shaking. From the hallway, I could hear the muffled sound of kids laughing and yelling, and every voice that got closer made my chest tighten. I didn't know what I was supposed to say. There was no script for this. The door opened. She walked in like she owned the place. Wiry, sharp-eyed, ponytail falling sideways, one shoelace dragging. She looked maybe 6 at first glance, but there was a confidence in the way she moved that said she'd had to grow up twice as fast. She dropped into the chair across from me, arms folded, chin lifted like she'd already decided I was wasting her time. "So," she said, "you the backup adult?" I almost laughed. Almost. But my throat closed too fast. "I guess I am," I said. "My name's Ross. Gwen was my wife." She blinked once. Didn't know she had a husband. She talked about me. "Not like I thought you were real," she said bluntly. She mentioned a Ross who likes spreadsheets more than people. I figured he was imaginary. That one landed. I took a breath, tried not to get defensive. "That's fair," I said. "I do like spreadsheets, but I liked Gwen more. A lot more." Kelly didn't respond, just stared at me like she was solving a math problem and waiting for me to give the wrong answer. I told her how Gwen and I met, that it was boring, at a fundraiser for the library, and how Gwen hated fancy events but went for the free wine. That made Kelly snort once, soft and fast. "She told me you never danced," she said. "Said you swayed like a tall palm tree in a hurricane." That stung too, but at least it meant she remembered her. "She talked about you all the time," I said. "She was so proud of you. She told me you liked birds with weird hair, and that you were smarter than most grown-ups she knew." Kelly's face didn't move. "She never brought anyone with her," she said finally. "Not once. Were you allergic to kids or just me?" "I was scared," I said. "That's not an excuse, just the truth. She wanted to tell me. I read her notebook. I know how long she waited." "You didn't come," Kelly said flat. "That's all I remember." I nodded. "You're right." Her thumb found the stress ball and started digging into it like she was trying to pop it. "Something happened the day we were supposed to come," I said. "That's why we never showed up." Kelly didn't blink. "She got tired of me. That's what happens. You don't have to make up car crashes." I leaned forward slightly, kept my voice low. "She didn't get tired of you. Gwen died in a wreck on the highway on her way here. I was home waiting. I didn't know where she was going. Not until I found the journal. That cracked something. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. But her grip on the stress ball tightened until her knuckles turned pale. She needed you before she died," Kelly said, eyes locked on mine. "And I needed her after. You're late for both." There was nothing smart to say. "I know," I said. "You're right. I was scared, and I didn't know, and none of that fixes anything. but I'm here now, and I'd like to come back, if you'd be okay with that." She sat in silence for a few seconds. Then she stood up, looked at the door, and threw one last line over her shoulder. "If you don't show up Saturday at 11, I'm telling everybody the backup adult chickened out." Then she left. I sat there alone in that tiny room, knees still aching, throat burning, trying not to picture the red ball or hear that stubborn tune from my dreams. There was no cosmic closure, no light pouring through the ceiling, just a kid who didn't trust anybody and a grown man who had earned it. But I knew one thing when I walked out of that room. I wasn't missing Saturday. I showed up that Saturday at 10:55, sat in the lobby, and acted like I hadn't been parked outside since 10:30 trying to slow my heartbeat. Kelly came in holding a sketch pad, ignored me for the first 5 minutes, then finally said, "You're not as late as usual," and slid the sketch pad over so I could see her newest creation, a bird with a mohawk, fangs, and a monocle. She called him Professor Pex. Sometimes she talked, sometimes she didn't. When she didn't, she'd draw and hum. Same 4-note tune from my dreams. At first I thought it was just something from a TV show. Later I started to think maybe it was just hers. By the third visit, Raymond pulled me aside in the hallway. "I think you should talk to someone at Child Services," he said. "Not to rush things, just to start a real plan." That's how I met Denise Miller. Denise looked exactly how you'd expect a veteran social worker to look. Practical clothes, no time for small talk, and the kind of eyes that miss nothing. She sat across from me in a stiff chair, read through the copy of Gwen's journal that Raymond had scanned, and then looked up at me like she was expecting me to bolt. "You know," she said, flipping a page, "most guys in your position don't even show up. And when they do, they usually quit after visit 2. This is not an easy process." "I'm not looking for warm and fuzzy," I said. "I'm looking for possible." "Possible is a long road," she replied. "You're grieving. You're single. You work in another state. And you're trying to step into the life of a child with major abandonment trauma. I'm not saying no. I'm saying if you're serious, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I'm not fast-tracking anything." Then she laid it all out like an endless, punishing checklist. Background checks, medical clearances, parenting classes, a full home study, supervised visits, and months of observation. Because Kelly was in Illinois and I lived in Milwaukee, Denise also had to file ICPC paperwork to legally allow placement across state lines. I nodded like I understood every acronym, but my head was already running project timelines and legal hurdles like it was work. "You'll also need a flexible job," she added. That hit hard. Work had already been circling back. My manager called me the same week, checking if I was done with all that time off stuff. He used that exact phrase, all that time off stuff, like I'd taken a vacation and not buried my wife. I asked about adjusting my schedule, just one remote day a week. He launched into some corporate script about core hours and setting precedents. I said I'd think about it. Then I drove home, dropped my keys on the kitchen counter, and stared at Gwen's coat still hanging by the door like she might come back for it. The first home visit happened the following Tuesday. Denise walked into the condo and stopped like she'd hit a force field. Gwen's shoes were still lined up under the bench. Her favorite mug, the one I finally moved off the counter, was now clean and sitting on the drying rack like it was waiting. The coat, the pictures, the posters from old festivals, everything exactly where it had been before the crash. Denise looked around once, took out her pen, and said carefully, "Ross, it's understandable you haven't touched anything, but for a child who's already grieving, walking into a space frozen in time can do more harm than good." I snapped without meaning to. "I didn't invite you here for therapy. Just check the plumbing and make sure I don't have lead paint." She didn't flinch, just wrote something down and said, "Okay." Of course, Kelly heard about it. Kids always do. The next Saturday, she raised an eyebrow and said, "So your place is a ghost museum? Cool. Can we charge admission?" Then she held up another bird sketch, this one labeled tour guide. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so accurate. That night, I drove out to Mom's place in the suburbs. Ingrid greeted me at the door with a sigh and a clean dish towel already in hand, like she was waiting to absorb bad news. I sat at her kitchen table while she made tea the old-fashioned way. Actual kettle, actual mug, no microwave. She didn't ask questions until I started talking. "I think I'm blowing up my life," I said. "I can't sleep, I keep snapping at work. I failed the last parenting quiz Denise sent, and I told a state worker to check my plumbing instead of grieving logistics." Mom stirred her tea without looking up. "Okay, anything else?" "I'm scared I'm going to screw this up, that I'll mess her up worse." She set her spoon down, looked me dead in the eye. "Ross, you never got to be a dad because of something you couldn't control. You're trying to do it now. Being scared doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're paying attention." I nodded, tried to say something. She wasn't done. "You have my full permission to screw up, be too loud, say the wrong thing, burn the dinner. Just stay. That's what kids need. Not perfect, just present." I think that was the first time I let out a real breath in weeks. A week later, I cleared out half the closet, folded up Gwen's coats, packed away her scarves, turned her old office into a maybe room. No frilly paint, no theme, just a bookshelf, a new lamp, a small desk I picked up off Craigslist. When I was done, I opened my laptop and sent one sentence to my manager. "I'll be remote every Wednesday going forward. That's not a request." He didn't respond for 2 days. When he did, it was one line. "Noted." And nothing collapsed. Once the condo stopped looking like a tribute museum, Denise's whole vibe shifted. She didn't start handing out gold stars or anything, but I could tell her tone had moved from, "This probably won't work," to, "Let's see what you do next." I'd take it. Raymond noticed too. He didn't say much, but the next time I brought Kelly back from a Saturday visit, he clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Don't underestimate consistency. Some of these kids go years without it." That consistency became our thing. Saturdays turned into short outings. First it was the Milwaukee lakefront, then a burger place Raymond swore by, and sometimes just the little park by the center with one decent climbing structure and a slide that made my knees crack when I sat on it. I wasn't trying to impress her. I just wanted her to know I wasn't going to flake. One weekend, the weather tanked, and I didn't want to sit in the center all afternoon. So I drove her to a strip mall pet store just to kill time. She acted bored at first, dragging her feet, pretending everything smelled weird. But the second we reached the bird section, she stopped cold. There was this little cockatiel, pale gray body, bright yellow crest, hopping around like it had something urgent to say. "He looks like he knows all your secrets," Kelly whispered, tapping the glass. "If I ever get a bird, I'm calling him Pixel, like tiny and annoying and always glitching." The store clerk must have caught the look on my face because she asked if Kelly wanted to hold it. I expected her to say no. She didn't trust much of anything, especially if it came with strings. But she held out her arm without saying a word. The bird climbed up, tilting its head like it was trying to read her thoughts. Kelly's face cracked open into this grin I hadn't seen before. Not sarcastic, not defensive, just real. And right then, like a complete idiot, I heard myself say, "If we ever get to the sleepover stage, we'll see about Pixel." I regretted it the second it left my mouth, but she didn't say anything. Just watched the bird, nodding a little, like she was filing that away somewhere important. Back at the center, Denise pulled me into the hallway. "You're doing well," she said, "but you should expect loyalty tests soon." "Loyalty tests?" She nodded. "Kids like Kelly, ones who've been abandoned, handed off, forgotten, they sometimes lash out when things get good. They test you. See if you'll leave like everybody else." "I'm not leaving." "I'm just saying," she said, "don't take it personally if she suddenly turns on you. She's not testing you because she hates you. She's testing you because she wants to believe you're the one who won't run." I said I understood. I meant it. But understanding something in theory and living through it are two very different animals. It happened the next week. My manager, same guy who told me noted in response to my remote day request, dropped a surprise Friday deadline on me and called it a growth opportunity. I worked late, missed my own prep time, and texted Raymond that I wouldn't be there until Sunday. When I showed up 2 days late, Kelly barely looked at me. Wouldn't speak for the first 15 minutes. Just kept drawing. Another weird bird, this one half on fire with angry eyebrows. I tried explaining the work thing. She didn't look up. I said I was sorry, I added. It's fine, she said flat. I'm like a hobby. You can put me back on the shelf when you're busy. Kelly? Relax, Ross. I'm practiced. My dad died before he could screw up. My mom checked out when I was 4. Gwen died on the way to see me. You're just keeping the pattern going. I sat back in the chair like she'd slapped me. There wasn't anything in my brain except static. I got in my car afterward and just sat in the parking lot, hands on the wheel, thinking maybe I was making everything worse, that maybe someone with less baggage should step in. Maybe it wasn't fair to drag her through another half-broken adult with a guilt complex and a schedule. I called Felix that night, told him what happened, told him maybe I wasn't the right person for this. He didn't even pretend to be gentle. You want to honor Gwen? He said. Then show up even when the kid tells you you're trash. That's the whole job, man. You show up. You don't flinch. That's what makes it real. So I did. I showed up the next Saturday, and the one after that. I kept showing up until Denise told me the ICPC paperwork for temporary placement had gone through, and overnights were cleared. You're approved for a trial period, she said. Let's see how she does in your space. When I told Kelly, she shrugged like it wasn't a big deal, but she showed up with a box already packed, a toothbrush, 3 stuffed animals, her sketch pad, and a smaller box with holes poked in it. Inside was the bird. You promised, she said, so I brought Pixel. I stared at the cockatiel sitting in that box like it had come to judge me personally. Its yellow crest flared. Then it chirped. Then it looked at me and made a loud screech like it was unimpressed by the size of my hallway. You already named him? I asked. Kelly rolled her eyes. He's had a name. He just didn't know where he lived yet. By the end of the week, that bird had claimed the curtain rod, the bookshelf, and my desk chair. He also started yelling, "Back up, adult," every time the doorbell rang, which Kelly swore she didn't teach him on purpose. But I didn't buy it for a second. Still, for the first time in a long time, the place didn't sound like silence anymore. It sounded like home. By the time the trees in our neighborhood turned orange and started dropping leaves like confetti, the home study was done. A few months had passed since the crash, and the routines were finally starting to stick. My fridge had food someone under 4 feet tall might actually want to eat, and there were colored pencil shavings and crushed pretzels ground into the rug of the room that used to be Gwen's office. Denise noticed all of it on her last walk through. She still didn't go easy on me. Every check-in, she drilled me on routines, screen time, work stress, parenting frustrations. Asked how often I raised my voice, what support systems I had in place, what I'd do if Kelly shut down again. But her notes changed. She stopped saying if, started saying when, and then the curveball landed. The state tracked down Zach's sister, Lorna Drake, a woman I'd never heard of until Denise called and said, "She wants to meet you." Her words, "The man trying to take legal custody of her brother's child." I went in expecting a fight. The meeting happened in Raymond's office. I wore the button-down shirt Kelly said made me look less like I sell boring insurance, and walked in braced for legal drama. But Lorna wasn't the enemy. She was exhausted. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun, delivery uniform still on, dark circles under her eyes like bruises. "I'm not here to blow this up," she said first. "I just want to look you in the eye and make sure she's not being handed off to someone who thinks she's a project." "She's not," I said. "She's—" Gwen's unfinished sentence. That stopped her. She sat back, crossed her arms, and looked around the room. At the artwork on the walls, the shelf of books labeled Gwen's Book Nook, the faded beanbags Gwen had bought off Craigslist. I never visited, Lorna said after a long pause. Not once. I was scared she'd ask why no one in her family wanted her. I thought staying away would hurt less. I was wrong. She didn't give a speech or demand anything, just nodded, said she'd think about it, and left. 2 days later, a plain white envelope showed up at my door. No return address. Inside was a letter on heavy paper with Gwen's name printed neatly at the top and her handwriting below. The first line read, "To Ross, and to any court that needs proof, I'm not crazy." It was dated 6 months before the accident. The rest was what I already knew. That she'd met Kelly, that she believed in her, that if anything ever happened to her, she hoped I'd at least try. It named me formally as her intended custodian if a path opened up. I gave it to Denise. By then, the court had already confirmed that Kelly's biological mother's parental rights had been terminated long ago. No one contested that part. A few days after I turned over Gwen's letter, Lorna signed a notarized statement of consent. The hearing was scheduled for early November, in a Milwaukee courtroom that looked like it hadn't changed since 1989. Denise went first. Her testimony was clear, practical, and full of enough behavioral details to make me sound like I knew what I was doing. Then Raymond stood up. He talked about Gwen, about Kelly, about the way she lit up when she talked about the maybe family. He said I'd kept showing up when most people would have quit. Then Mom testified. Ingrid kept it short. She said I'd always been slow to leap, but steady when it mattered. That her son had a ridiculous cockatiel screaming at him daily, and still showed up for math homework and emotional landmines. And then Lorna stood. She told the court she'd walked in ready to block the adoption. That she thought family meant blood and guilt and obligation. But after reading Gwen's letter, after watching Kelly walk through that center like it was hers, after hearing the way the girl talked about Ross and Pixel and snacks and spreadsheets, she'd realized Kelly needed something better than a name on a family tree. She needed permanence. Finally, the judge looked at me. "You're a numbers guy," he said. "You've got a good job, a lot of grief, and a much easier road if you walked away. Why choose this?" I didn't pause. Because starting over without Kelly would feel like quitting on both of them. He signed the order. Kelly squeezed my hand so hard I thought she was going to break a knuckle. "So am I, like official now," she whispered. "Do I get a badge or a certificate or something?" "You get a really loud bird and my last name." "Cool," she said, grinning. "But I still want a badge." On the courthouse steps, Felix held the travel cage Kelly insisted we bring. Pixel squawked at full volume the second we walked out, yelling, "Back up, adult!" while Denise laughed harder than I'd ever seen her. A month later, the Milwaukee Library Board voted on my proposal, a full renaming of the Children's Corner in honor of Gwen. I didn't cry when they approved it, but I did feel something loosen in my chest that hadn't moved since the accident. At the first event, Kelly stood at the podium with shaking hands and read 3 paragraphs from Gwen's favorite picture book. Pixel muttered nonsense from his carrier beside me, and no one told him to stop. The first spring after the adoption felt different. The city was still gray in patches, but the light had changed. Sharper, honest, like it was finally done apologizing for winter. It was a clear Sunday when we drove out to the cemetery at the edge of Milwaukee, the one with the crooked fence line and the old maple tree leaning like it was tired of pretending to stand up straight. I didn't have to ask. Kelly packed the flowers herself, 2 bundles wrapped in paper towels and tinfoil. Pixel rode in his travel cage, squawking the entire ride like we'd kidnapped him on his day off. We walked the short gravel path in silence. No dramatics. Just her small hand carrying the flowers like it was a job that mattered. Gwen's stone was exactly where it always was, tucked just enough under the maple that leaves would hit it first come fall. We cleaned it together. Kelly used her sleeve, wiped the dust off the lettering, then crouched and ran her finger along the carved line at the bottom. "More love, less fear," she read out loud. She had good handwriting. Then, still crouched, she tilted her head toward the stone and said, "I passed my reading test, by the way. Also, Pixel learned 3 whole sentences and one kind of bad word that he says when he's bored. I didn't say anything. Just stood behind her, holding the birdcage, nodding like that stone could see it. Back home, the afternoon stretched out easy. I made grilled cheese the way Ingrid taught me. Too much butter, too little patience, one eye on the pan and one on the kid. Kelly sat at the small kitchen table doing math homework with her tongue sticking out between her teeth like she was arm wrestling the numbers. Pixel paced the curtain rod, head twitching every time we spoke, soaking it all in like he was collecting blackmail. Then it happened. Clear as glass, in that weird little robotic tone of his, Pixel said, "More love, less fear." I froze, spatula midair. Kelly didn't even look up, just smirked like she'd been waiting. "I've been whispering it to him," she said, "at night, so he won't forget it like grown-ups do." I swallowed, hard. "Hear that, Dad?" she added, testing the word again, rolling it around in her mouth. "Even the bird says you're stuck with me now." That word landed sharp and deep, and I felt it hit something solid, but I kept my voice steady. "Good," I said. "Because you're stuck with a guy who still uses his fingers to count when he's tired and burns grilled cheese every 3rd try." "Every 2nd try," she corrected. I turned back to the stove, pretending not to smile. Above the table hung her old drawing, the one from the center. Gwen with the curly hair, a book in her hands, a kid by her side, and that ridiculous bird with the giant crest perched on her head. Only now, next to them, she'd added another figure in different colored marker. Glasses, messy hair, holding a mug that said, "World's Okayest Grown-Up." The Milwaukee Festival had already posted the fall sign-ups. The kids' program had a wait list longer than ever. The downtown library now had a permanent banner, Gwen Griffin Reading Room. Flyers for story time were taped to every hallway in the building. Our condo had crayons under the cushions, birdseed in every corner, and math worksheets with bite marks in the margins. Pixel yelled, "Back up, adult," every time someone knocked on the door, then laughed at his own joke. And me? I stood there at the stove, one hand on the spatula, listening to Kelly and that ridiculous bird argue over who got the last French fry. And I didn't feel haunted anymore. I didn't feel like I was borrowing someone else's future or walking through Gwen's shadow. What I felt was steady, not perfect, not fixed, but real. I glanced over at Gwen's photo on the shelf, the same one that used to sit on her desk back when I thought spreadsheets and routines were enough. I nodded at it. Not a speech, not a moment of silence, just a nod. Then I flipped the second sandwich, already burnt on one side, and Pixel chirped the phrase that had somehow pulled all of us forward. More love, less fear. Before you head out, let me put something on your mind. If you were in Ross's shoes, would you have stepped into that kid's life or walked away? And hey, if you've got hype, tap it now to push this story to more people. Make sure you subscribe and hit like. It really helps more than you think. And drop a quick comment, even just "good story" or your take on it. Love you guys.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.